Good morning and welcome to the Life class on November the 10th, 2024. And welcome back. It certainly fall is in the air. And in case you are listening and not here, I'll try to arouse the sense of smell in you all of warm pumpkin bread brought by Julie. Thank you again. So we can pass that around. There's napkins also over there, and I see some of you have coffee. We have about 63 of you that are listening between other states, people that I know, and people that travel quite a bit and can't make it in. So we are a growing family. And I wanted to thank you all for the feedback that you've given me on last week's topic, which was fear of abandonment. Many of you said that it was information you'd never heard before. And unfortunately, the volume button got turned off in all my preparations last week, so we ended up without a video. However, I will be repeating that. It's a very important one. So for now, we will move on to another topic today. I want to make an announcement. Several of you have had trouble getting the audio podcast. We have a solution that we have tried and tested. I hear from one of our participants from a very high IT level that due to recent filtration out of different software, it's very, very difficult to get everything to work on everyone's computer. And so what we're going to be doing is working more by sending it directly to your text. So if there's anybody who cannot get it by our current method, make sure that I have your cell phone number, okay? And so I'll probably still send you the content part via email, but I'll be sending you the audio podcast to your cell phone text number. I wanted to, on this Sunday following a very, very active and perhaps activating week, share a prayer and some scriptures that are very meaningful at our outset so that we might gather ourselves in unity. This is something that was sent from our friends over in the UK, and I think this would be a wonderful time to do this, to get quiet and to center ourselves. And you may close your eyes, you may uncross as we begin to relax and welcome in what we may choose to call God, our Creator, perhaps our higher power. Perhaps you're not sure, and that's all right this morning. You've heard me enough to know that there are many people listening who are not comfortable in a church. As I enter prayer now, I pause to be still, to breathe slowly, and to recenter my scattered senses upon the presence of God. O God of rescue and restoration, we thank you for your great and your beautiful mission in this world. Here we are, Lord. Fill us with your Spirit. Send us out from what we learn in this life class. Together we choose to rejoice in your transforming love today. And we join with the ancient praise of all God's people in the words of Psalm 103. Let all that I am praise the Lord, and may I never forget the good things he does for me. He forgives all my sins. He heals all my diseases. He redeems me from death and crowns me with love and tender mercies. He fills my life with good things. So in this week, when we in America have voted our 47th president, political leaders are front page news, we reflect on the words of Isaiah, a prophet who described what the coming Messiah, God's anointed leader, would do. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. They shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastation of many generations. Amen. The last was an Old Testament reading from Isaiah 61, should you choose to reference it. And I'd like to draw your attention to the great metaphor of all this, as we as a society, as a world. But what we are first doing in here in this room is perhaps taking time for the very first occasion in our life, some of us, to see how we rebuild our insides, the devastation of former generations, taking what has been tragic, perhaps traumatized in our life, what we have learned that simply isn't true, and asking God, asking the Holy Spirit, or whatever our belief system might be, to bring that together, to bring all those black charred places together and transform that into gold for our use, not only in ending our own what can be called serial, not as in Cheerios, but SERIAL, serial suffering. What are those things that we might do very subconsciously, we're not aware of, to put ourselves in situations that just repeat old patterns? Okay? So it's almost as though we have a city inside us, a city of shambles inside us sometimes. And I believe with all of my being that it is God's will that we rebuild strong and powerful families and cities and personhoods as we come to this. That's what the life class is indeed about. So our topic this morning is a very natural one, and it is manipulation. So you can think of all kinds of reasons why we might choose this one this morning. I'm going to have a handout for you at the very end that details a whole lot of this. That's just quite a good one. So don't feel like that you need to take notes. And of course, I have the volume up to whatever the top volume is on all settings, so you will have an audio podcast. But this is such a word that we hear frequently. I think when we've been on the kind of political and social, and even if we didn't have an election, we've talked so much about social media and the manipulation from our consumer viewpoint, concern about our adolescents being exposed to that this has been a hot topic for a very, very long time. There are a lot of reasons why people do it, but one of the reasons that we are finding out, the brain researchers and clinical psychologists are beginning to always come back to what happened to the brain before that makes it vulnerable. In other words, this complex trauma that I have dwelt on that we're teaching. And so let me begin with just a definition of what is manipulation. You go out and you ask people, go out to the park and take a mic around and interview them, and if I were smart enough technically to do a great video and entertain you with the flashy stuff, somebody might say, well, it's when somebody tells me to do something and I don't want to do it. or it's when somebody's lied to me and I find out it's all lies. You'll hear things like this. But here's a formal definition. It's any attempt to sway a person's emotions or thinking so they change how they think or feel in order to get them to act in a specific way. Or it's an attempt to control others so that they meet what you might perceive are your needs. So they'll do what you want. And often it's at their expense. So in other words, it's something called exploitative. And I will never forget when that word was dropped upon me. This was about 30 years ago, in reference to, not to what I was doing, but to what another person was doing to me, and it was like a bomb. That sounded so harsh, but people have been trying to get me to see that pattern for a very, very long time, and I couldn't see it. And it was delivered to me in a package like this. When are you, Anne, going to see that this person's actions are exploitative? And I just remember just one of those moments, because that communicated to me in a way that the word manipulation or having their own way just kind of couldn't. So manipulation uses people, it's deceptive. If there's a hidden agenda, it's an attempt to seize power in a relationship. And I'm not talking about little subconscious things that are harmless, oh, come on, go shopping with me, you really want to, trying to get somebody, to do something that's going to get them out of a funk for the day. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things that are not healthy, things that violate love. And so we are going to see that it does a lot of damage. So on the unhealthy part, the question is, why would a person do it if it destroys marriages? Why would a person do it if it dooms a relationship to destruction? So why do so many people do it? So let's come at it today from a complex trauma perspective and begin by setting it up by saying, okay, what would a healthy home look like? Not a perfect home, there are no perfect. What might a healthy home look like? What would it be like for a child in a healthy home? So when we come into the world as a baby, as a little child, with instincts to be trusting, to openly communicate all our needs, our emotions, our desires. And then we begin to talk. We want to communicate our dreams. And in a healthy home, the child would be listened to by the parents. And the parents might communicate with each other and say, how can we best work to understand how little so-and-so, might be looking at this? And they would listen to the child's needs and desires and listen to their sharings. And then they would work together to figure out from a wise parent mind, what's the healthiest thing for our child? What's our best move in order to meet those needs? Something like that. So from that, can you see that in a healthy home, a child would never have to manipulate anybody to get their needs met? There might be quite a bit of time and patience and negotiation and back and forth. But that learned need for, I'm never going to get my needs met, nobody understands me, I feel totally powerless, I can't connect, that we've been talking about, the odds of that being there again and again and again would be greatly diminished. So if a child can honestly communicate everything about themselves and they have that kind of receptivity in the home, it could be quite healthy. But in a complex trauma home, the same child will come with all those natural instincts to be authentic, to express their needs and desires and dreams, and it's a very different response. Now I'm going to put a disclaimer here. If a child has a personality disorder, extreme personality disorder, and there are those cases, I don't think that this applies. There are some children that just are so extreme on behavioral disorders. I'm talking about outside of something like that. So we also have seen some children that do not have that are open, trusting, little authentic children, and they come into a home. And in some homes, they're made to feel like they're being selfish for having those needs. And so they're punished for having natural needs. And then their needs are used to shame them, and they're scorned. The parents use those needs to make fun of them. And so the child learns they're not going to get their needs met by asking, and certainly not by telling the parent what their needs are going to be. The only way to get the needs met is that the child's going to have to figure out how to meet them, how to get them met ourselves. And so as a child, I'm going to have to manipulate. And so if I want to survive in a house where I am, manipulation is a necessary survival tool. Now, I think that if you grow up, perhaps even as in an alcoholic or chemically dependent home, or where some kind of addiction is present, this is one of these situations where it's a foregone conclusion that I'm going to have to figure it out. And so this is where there can be two main kinds of manipulation. There's sort of the predatory, really bad manipulation and dangerous manipulation, and then there's the kind that we learn just to survive. I think I used the example not too long ago in my talk where my dad said, "Can you teach me to learn how to read your mother, how to get along with your mother?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I'm not too sure about that. First of all, you need to just be the man. And second of all, you're not a girl, so I can't explain it to you." But you can see in our home that hypervigilant scanning was the only way to survive around explosions or silent treatment or whatever. So you'll just find that this is very common, and of course we take this into adulthood. Also, you can find that figuring out how to work people. Now, it's like anything else. You can use it for good, that can be used to inspire, that can be used to heal, that can be used to point people in a positive way that they want to go, would be the healthy side of this. But this can also be used for purposes that are not good, that are for power and control reasons. So if someone has a hidden agenda, children can be very, 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 very susceptible to predators. And of course, we know parents in here and grandparents on the internet, just how much fear and how much angst that this has caused all of us who've dealt with parents and grandparents in our society. So the child has a pretty good chance, if they have grown up in a very unhealthy home, of developing some shame. They might feel down deep, well, they're not meeting my needs because I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable enough. And the last thing I'm going to do going into a relationship is share honestly who I am and what I need, because it's going to be met the same way it was met in my biological family. It's interesting. So many strange things, are happening in our world, but it's not been, it's not a strange thing to see adolescents or kids who are like this, taking on alter identities or taking on personality of other people or just making up a very strange story, to correspond with other kids on the internet, sort of self-protective anyway, but it's also, they sort of morph into that personality. They're not about to trust anybody with their heart. So the only way I'm going to get my needs met is by being secretive and manipulating other people. Another question is, what does a child do with a dictator parent? I remember being in college and hearing the phrase, my way, but the highway. My way, but the highway, about somebody's dad. Somebody who never gives in, somebody who's always got to be right. But then, what does the child do in order to get what they need? And I was sitting in psychology class, and I thought, well, you just work with it, you just manipulate it, you just find ways around that parent. I don't see what the problem is. And I realized how my own manipulative skills had gotten to be so good. I remember meeting with my professor and saying, I think I'm a manipulator. And he was so wonderful, Dr. Queener, at Rhodes College. He talked with me and he said, honey, you've had to. Just always check your motive. And that was so good for me to get that advice so young. So finding ways around that parent. And the child also has this huge need for stability and security. But what happens in a child's world where there is no stability? Maybe their parents are openly fighting in front of the kids, like all the time. Maybe there is a long, lengthy, contentious divorce where there's open fighting and the parents are putting the child in the middle. I'm not saying there can't be peaceable, graceful divorces and done really well, and I don't see those kids suffering and they grow up to be fine, but it can be done well, or it can be done this way with a lot of drama where everybody feels out of control and the child begins to feel helpless. And in order to get a feeling of power, they need to learn to manipulate and control situations. So sometimes we just find, and I'm thinking of one person in particular, that was a student in the class that I took long ago, who doesn't remember a time when he wasn't a student of strengths and weaknesses. As soon as he learned to write, he would keep a log of what the parents' strengths and weaknesses would be. And it was just absolutely amazing. He had little journals in which he would do that, just almost like, I don't know where he would have picked that up, but so young. But he did not use it for good. He used it for what he could use against them, and what he needed in order to manipulate them effectively. And of course, this went into some real problems later. So he developed a radar that detected the moods of everybody in the family, all of the time. And it was just a situation in which he worked himself into an isolation. Now that's a very extreme case, but the point of life is to know that we're not responsible for the moods of other people. But very often when we've grown up around a lot of coldness and anger and these kind of things that we're afraid of, we could still be very, very afraid. I know for a long time, and the talks about this, is that anger was so explosive and so ugly, or cold, silent rage, anything but just effectively and calmly working out conflict, with no bad thing getting ready to happen, that anytime I would hear the volume or anytime I would get triggered, I would just kind of go into shell shock. And that's a very, very common for any of us who've grown up in a complex trauma household. I think that when we have to learn how to just try to survive and we develop these little tools, is that we build up a little toolbox and we try manipulation tool number 1, and if that doesn't work, it's not a problem. We'll go on to manipulation tool number 2, and if that's not a problem, we've got 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to give you this morning in sort of the soup of these next few pages 31 different tools that can be used to manipulate others. And it generally takes a child quite a long time to run out of these if they have got a lot stockpiled, as those of you who are parents and grandparents well know. Some of them are just, normal, kid, preschool, middle schooler, certainly teenage years. They're absolutely great at that. And then other ones of these we can take in more into adulthood, and perhaps we have suffered in a relationship, could be platonic, could be somebody that we are still struggling with. We'll recognize that, and I find that if we have a name for something and can identify it, just like my light bulb moment of I just wasn't seeing it, and I was allowing myself to participate in something that I could not see, and it was evident to everybody but me. And why was I needing to be in this place to be healed? I was participating in my own suffering. I did not realize I was allowing myself to be manipulated. So I always try to use myself as an example. So having a sense of helplessness when you grow up not being heard or you can't get your needs met. Martin Seligman, I believe it is, a psychologist, writes a lot about learned helplessness. When nothing works, when nothing works, when nothing works. We don't have times in our life where we can see ourselves being powerful and making these changes. And so we really don't know that realm exists until you learn how to set boundaries and things change. And it's a little rough because people don't like it. So sometimes people not only manipulate to get their needs met, but they need to feel power over other people. And so as they get into adult life and they enter into any relationship, they go for position and to attain a position of power over somebody else so they can use them and manipulate them. And as I mentioned, in very severe cases, like in personality disorders, things like that, or severe trauma, they don't want that position of power just for that, to really enforce how powerful they are, but they need to have a cruelty aspect to their manipulation. They have a need to make other people look stupid. They may even need to hurt others. They may need to make other people feel helpless, so it takes a really cruel direction. Number 1, use intense emotional connection to control another person's behavior. So let's say that a guy has cheated on his partner and she's threatening to leave, and she probably should, but he's afraid of losing her. So here's what he does. He buys her a new car. It's like the commercial where you've got the new car with the big Christmas bow, and she comes out of the house and everything's sparkling and the snowflakes are coming down, and candlelight dinner, all kinds of things. They jet off to the Caribbean. Why? To create all these loving feelings, because then he can get her to give him another chance. All these, remember the oxytocin hormones that we talked about in the limbic brain? that'll cause somebody to say inside, okay, and we see how much of a forgetting disease that we have when that oxytocin rushes in. So if that person using that tactic can change our limbic emotional brain, then it changes our thinking, right? It trumps our adult cerebral cortex. And that will cause us to give in to whatever they want to do. Even if we see through the plan, it still causes us to do that. There's a little second one that's connected, and some of these kind of overlap a little bit, but it's called love bombing. And I think most of you have heard this. Some of these have little names that, again, I think naming something so that you kind of take it out of the muddy confusion and call it what it is helpful. Let's say you set a boundary, maybe with your parents. I run into this with young couples a lot. And the couple says, you guys can't keep phoning me 10 times a day and dropping over and coming on in the house without phoning ahead of time. And what do? Well, they know what the buttons are. They start offering to babysit like every weekend, or maybe they've gone to Costco and just on their way home, they come in, pull the station wagon in the driveway. We just thought we'd pick up some diapers and some things for you on the way home. So they start bombing the couple with love, because what they want you to do is say to yourself, how could I have said that? How could I set a boundary with these kind and loving people who only want the best for me? It would just feel wrong to do that now, right? Aren't I right? See this all the time. So love bombs are there to break down, that's why they call them bombs, to break down your natural guard, to bring you to a place to where you trust, or you let them back into your life even though maybe they don't deserve it, okay? Another one plays on a person's security. So this is what advertising companies do all the time, how they get you to buy their product even though you don't really need it. So this is the power of suggestion. And I can watch my own brain just being a sucker for this kind of stuff. So I'm glad I'm able to kind of like watch my thoughts now. It used to be I was rather unconscious about this. So they try to make it sound like because you have gray hairs coming in, or because you have a bit of extra weight, or because you've got the crepey jaw starting, or because your skin is crepey right here, and they focus in microscopic detail. Is this you? Are you sure? You could just, you may be perfectly happy and just sitting there, feel great about yourself, and by the time the commercials run, I'm nitpicking myself to death. Okay? And should you have these things, you are not beautiful, you are not sexy, you are not desirable, And so we worry about our little girls from age 7, 8 on up. We see this indoctrination happening. It's all about the money, manipulation through all of the screens. So if the brain says, if I am not that, without any of those flaws, no one will ever want me. Great insecurity breeders. So we have a whole cosmetic industry. It will keep those fans loyal to them. So we may also have things like, and I see this a lot in people that are beginning to date for the first time, maybe even people in their 50s and 60s, and we talked a little bit about online dating or romance scams, I think last time. There's a trick about where the other person who is our would-be manipulator lets the person speak first. I want to know all about you. I want to know your life story. And they're expert listeners. Let them talk. have someone with a good heart who hasn't been listened to in years. Maybe he was never listened to as a child. I've worked a lot with people who have sort of the psychology of how people are drawn into cults, and all of this is the same psychology. There's a way that people have of listening. But they're just gathering information. So instead of being this caring, skilled, loving person, they're gathering information so they can work you. And you just thought you were sharing with that person who genuinely cared. You had no idea that you might be sharing with a manipulator who would use that information to manipulate you. And that is a concern for those of us who want to keep an open heart and be good people, who never thought about this kind of stuff before. But it's really good to know what the confidentiality history is of a new person, brand new person that we meet, and kind of play with this about building trust very slowly, over time, knowing the person's background. Here's a common one with biological families, and I always find over the holidays when people are making plans on which family members they're going to visit and how they're going to do the holidays, this comes up. Setting a boundary with parents and, sorry, Mom, we've got to go see, the in-laws this year, or we've got to go, my sister's going to come to our house, or we just can't go to the brother in California this year, whatever the arrangement's going to be. And there are some lines or scripts that come up every time that are so wounding, and they play upon our false guilt. Here's one of them. After all we've done for you, that's how you're going to treat us? You're so selfish. And they're going to try to make you feel guilty. And these words are often passed down through families. And it is just so painful to hear or to watch, because what happens is those words find a target within the person who's just doing the best that they can. And the thing is that a person, whether it's a parent or a boss or whoever this person is, can't manipulate us with guilt unless we already have some guilt that we haven't resolved. It's got something down in there. So it's not just about this, it's about having been told that or feeling guilty about something. So it only works if it connects with something in you, and that's what gives them the power over you. It exploits, there's that word again, that unresolved area inside of you. So it's false accusations. I see one that comes up over and over and over in families that just really, when someone's trying to better their lives and maybe are sort of living in a community or in a profession where the family just can't relate to their life or what they've achieved, they'll pull out, you think you're better than us, and that's why you're setting a boundary. Do you just think you're better than we are? And so instead of encouraging maybe the adult child to go on and follow their dreams or go on to college, it's almost like a demeaning effect. So they're trying to get you, again, to tear it down, but you don't think you're better than them, but they spin it that way to create guilt. Or a family might say, when you start setting boundaries with families and building your own support network that's healthier, oh, so you don't value your family after all we've done to be there for you? All you think about is yourself. You don't ever think about the needs of others. None of those things are true, but it's the spinning with a false accusation to try and create guilt. So what can happen is, and I've been through this personally, Many manipulators will bombard you with false accusations and lies, and then they get you to the point over time where you're questioning maybe they're telling the truth, and then they just start a process with so many lies that you start to totally doubt yourself. And there's a wearing out over time where you just are almost lucky to get out of it. You feel like you're just a mere reflection of yourself. There's an emptiness. And that's really sad, and often people have very skewed ideas about what the Bible says about separation, about divorce, a situation like this, and I'm very quick to try to speak on that from a scriptural point of view, mental health point of view. God is about life and the cherishing of life, and there are many ways to die a death on this earth, and that is one of them. So another thing that people will do is to throw out very vague generalities, exaggerations, but it's misrepresented or skewed just a little bit. So think about it. How do you debate a generality? It's like, I can't get a foothold. Somebody, says a specific, like, Anne, what is the value of your bringing your notes versus just memorizing? Well, we could talk about that, but if you just said, well, what's the value of doing this topic? Okay, it's hard, so you get what I mean. So when someone comes at you with very flawed logic in a generality, that person is generally just trying to just kind of knock you off base, and it's not really there, to try to work out something important. They're there to kind of get power or try to make you feel guilty. Here's the next one. They may play the martyr. They might attempt to get you to feel sorry for them. Oh, here's a big one. Oh, we just can't eat. We can't sleep. We're just so worried about you. You just have made your mother a nervous wreck over the fact that you haven't made this decision yet, or that you're going to move away so far from us. Now, if the person was making really bad decisions, and that was really true, and it could be phrased a little differently, but, that might not be such a bad thing. You're being honest about that, Kid needs to go to rehab, you want to know how you're affecting the mom. I mean, that's not too bad a thing. But if the kid is making good decisions to get healthy, it could be setting some new boundaries, new activities, making good healthy friends. They're using that. But if a parent is saying they can't sleep and now they're just sick thinking about the decisions, a lot of times it's a manipulator thing, like to say your family's your only safety. You need to come over more often. There's nobody safe out there. You see, it's more like kind of a cult type of thing to reinforce the family message. So it's just a way of saying, I'm just not sure that you love me anymore. So here's how you can prove you love me. If you love me, you'll do this for me. And so it's making an adult sort of prove their love, prove their loyalty to the family, when instead the healthy parent needs to be encouraging them to explore their potential and take healthy pride in the fact that they have equipped an adult child. But you don't always see that. So, going back to being afraid of very angry people, this is not uncommon at all. If somebody starts getting very angry at them, one of the instincts inside says, I'll give you whatever you want, just don't be angry. And it's very effective. That's one way to respond. The other is in a passive-aggressive type of manipulation. It's like I won't be pushed around, I'm just going to annoy you back. And so that means that I don't have to get visibly angry, but I'm just going to just be here, and I'm denying that you're going to hurt me at all. Or I could just give you a silent treatment. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm never going to give you a hug. Or you just hit a stone wall with me. Or you might cry and pout and act sad and mope around the house. There's all kinds of strategies with that, but the point is that being incredibly uncomfortable with fear down there around anger. And it's taken me a while, but I can finally be in a room, and I was last week, where somebody can be halfway out of their chair screaming at the other person, and I know it's not about me. And inside I always go, yippee-yi-yay, little victory, like, how much therapy has this taken? Thank you, God, for all the people that have helped me get to this point, because I can think 20 years back, and I would know it was about me. Because most people think that from complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. Here's another one that comes up with parents sometimes. You just set the boundary with the parents, and then there's a crisis, and the phone rings. You get the phone call. I know that you've told us not to call, but this is horrible. This is just horrible. Hang on just a minute. Your sister is in really bad trouble. And then they explain that they're trying to get you to rush to the ER, rush the situation. She's overdosed again, blah, 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 all this information. And so they want you the way you used to be. They want you to snap back into that position to where you rush to the scene and make all the decisions. And they want you back in crisis mode. They want you to forget all the boundaries you set. So this comes up all the time. I remember getting a phone call this summer about this very same thing when I was on vacation. And it's very, very common, particularly when you have someone who is just sort of a repeat relapser, whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or whatever it is. And it's so hard to set those boundaries with family, particularly if the parents lean on an adult child or one of the siblings to always come to the rescue. It's really hard. And sometimes you have what's called triangulation. So let's say, and this is all in the notes I have. So let's say you set a boundary with mom, and all of a sudden you get a phone call from dad or your sister or your aunt. And this is the person that's sitting at home and didn't go to the ER and said, I've said what I had to say. I love you, but I'm doing what I need to do. Phone calls again. Why are you treating your mom so cruelly? Don't you love your sister? So mom has called another family member, and so they go out and recruit support. So now you get all your aunts and your uncles and your grandparents and your siblings coming and ganging up on you and saying, why are you treating mom so badly? Or mom might get her support by going to Google and finding on the internet all kinds of documents that say, you should really give in to your mother because that really is what love is. And I think, you can get the internet to basically, you can find something that supports any idea if you look long enough. And then you can add a real healthy dose of shame onto that. People are really good at that. So that's why it's important to have either support groups or other people who have been through the same thing or something similar that you have been with that understand that form of manipulation. People that are not educated with this and don't understand the type of damage that it can do to your recovery program. we are just about at a pause moment, and I think that this is really good so that you can kind of look at what's going on in your life. Two things: where you may have been or still be manipulated, and this handout will give you all the different ways. And like myself, are there ways that you may come across in which you are still subconsciously manipulating, maybe doing a lot of work that you don't have to do? There may be things you're trying to control that you really don't need to. We've just gotten so used to doing it. So I encourage you to look at the audio that will be coming your way, and we will probably pick back up a little bit next week, and if we feel like we've covered it sufficiently, we will not. I just ask peace and blessing to all of you this week, and safety on the road. Happy autumn, and we will see you again next week.